My billionaire grandfather left hundreds of millions to the rest of the family, but to me, he left a dented 10-year-old sedan. In the marble boardroom, my father smirked, and my brother openly laughed, mocking my years in the military while they divided luxury estates, private jets, and investment portfolios. I took the worn key without uttering a single word of protest. But when I sat in that cracked driver's seat and started the engine, the outdated navigation screen flickered on, displaying a single locked destination labeled simply, home. My grandfather hadn't lived at those coordinates in 40 years. Driven by suspicion, I followed the route deep into a secluded mountain overlook, completely unaware that this old car was never meant for the road. It was a locked vault carrying the evidence needed to bring my entire corrupt family to their knees. My name is Alexandra Walton. At 28 years old, I had just returned home from 6 years of military service, still carrying the discipline of the uniform and the quiet grief of losing the only man in my family who ever believed in me, my grandfather, Arthur Walton. I sat at the far end of the mahogany conference table on the 40th floor of Walton Enterprises. Across from me sat my father, Richard, and my older brother, Julian. Neither of them had worn the uniform, and neither of them had spent the last 3 months at grandfather's bedside. But they wore their expensive Italian suits with the smug certainty of men about to claim an empire worth over $2 billion. "Let's make this quick," Julian scoffed, checking his gold watch. "We all know why we're here." The estate attorney cleared his throat, reading through the massive distributions. The prime downtown real estate went to Richard. The luxury private aviation fleet and investment portfolios went to Julian. Hundreds of millions were divided in minutes, their faces lighting up with greedy triumph. Then came my name. "To my granddaughter Alexandra," the attorney read. "I leave my 2014 silver sedan parked in the lower garage, along with its full contents." Julian burst out laughing. "A 10-year-old beater for the soldier girl. Dad, make sure she pays for the parking ticket on her way out." Richard merely smirked, shaking his head at my apparent disgrace. I didn't flinch. 6 years of military training had taught me never to let the enemy see you react. I stood up, took the worn brass key from the desk, and walked out without a word. The elevator ride down to the basement garage was silent, the echo of Julian's mockery still lingering in my mind. Deep in the dimly lit corner of level P3 sat the 2014 silver sedan. Its paint was faded, and a faint layer of dust covered the windshield. To Richard and Julian, it was a humiliating insult, a scrap thrown to an outcast. I unlocked the driver's door. The familiar scent of leather, peppermint, and grandfather's pipe tobacco instantly filled the cabin, bringing a sudden tightness to my throat. Sitting behind the wheel, I noticed the interior was immaculate. Everything was meticulously preserved, far cleaner than a neglected 10-year-old car had any right to be. I slipped the worn brass key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life with an unexpected, finely tuned purr, far too powerful for a standard factory model. Suddenly, the outdated navigation screen in the center console flickered brightly. Instead of loading the standard default menu, the display bypassed every system setting and locked onto a single, unchangeable route. The destination field flashed in bold red letters, "Home." I stared at the coordinates. It wasn't the family mansion, nor was it the suburban home where I grew up. It pointed toward an isolated peak along the winding Blackwood Ridge, an area 40 miles outside the city where grandfather hadn't set foot in 4 decades. A soft click echoed through the speakers, followed by the crackle of a pre-recorded audio file. Grandfather's deep, steady voice filled the car. "Alexandra, follow the route alone. Do not return until you check the rear compartment." My pulse surged. I shifted into drive and headed toward the mountains. The winding mountain road grew steeper as thick fog rolled in between the pine trees. After 45 minutes of climbing, the GPS signaled my arrival at an abandoned scenic overlook, perched high above the valley. Below, the distant city lights flickered, marking the very industrial sector where grandfather Arthur had built his first manufacturing plant from nothing 60 years ago. I cut the engine. The silence was absolute until the crunch of gravel broke through the dusk. From behind an old ranger station, a tall silhouette emerged, stepping into the beam of my headlights. My hand drifted instinctively toward my tactical training, but as the man stepped closer, I recognized the weary, familiar face beneath the heavy wool coat. It was Mr. Callahan, grandfather's personal attorney and closest confidant for over 4 decades. "I knew you would make the drive, Alexandra," Callahan said quietly, his breath misting in the cold mountain air. "Mr. Callahan? What is this?" I asked, stepping out into the chilly wind. "What did grandfather leave here?" Callahan gave a solemn, knowing smile. "Arthur knew exactly what Richard and Julian would do once he was gone. That reading in the boardroom was a test, Alexandra, and a legal diversion. He gave them the illusion of wealth to expose their true character." He reached into his inner pocket and retrieved a heavy, specialized electronic key fob stamped with the Walton crest. "Your grandfather didn't leave you a broken-down car," Callahan continued, placing the cold metal device into my hand. "He left you the vault, the evidence, and the master key to everything they thought they stole." I took the heavy fob and walked around to the back of the sedan. Popping the trunk, I lifted the worn carpet liner and removed the spare tire. Beneath the metal floorboard was an aftermarket electronic console that had been welded directly into the reinforced chassis. I pressed the electronic key against the sensor. With a sharp hiss of pneumatic pressure, a hidden steel compartment slid open, revealing an array of neatly bound folders, encrypted flash drives, and a set of official government seal documents. My hands trembled as I opened the top leather binder. Inside lay the true, irrevocable primary trust of Arthur Walton, dated just 3 weeks before his death. The document left the entirety of Walton Global Holdings, the parent company owning every building, account, and subsidiary, directly to me. "The registration of this car," Callahan explained, leaning over the trunk, "is legally tethered to the controlling voting shares of the entire empire. Whoever holds the vehicle's title owns the company outright." I dug deeper into the compartment and pulled out a stack of financial forensics reports. They contained detailed bank statements and forged authorization signatures proving that Richard and Julian had been siphoning millions into offshore accounts while grandfather was in hospice care. They thought they had buried their tracks, but grandfather had hired private forensic accountants to record every illegal wire transfer. Arthur hadn't just left me a fortune, he had left me an ironclad trap. "They think they won the war this afternoon," I whispered, locking the steel safe back into the frame. "Now," Callahan said, "it's time to deliver the verdict." I drove Arthur's silver sedan straight through the wrought iron gates of the Walton estate. The sprawling driveway was packed with luxury sports cars and limousines. Inside, crystal chandeliers illuminated a lavish victory gala where Richard and Julian were already celebrating their supposed inheritance with the city's high society elite. I parked the dusty sedan directly in front of the grand entrance, stepping out in my crisp dress uniform with the leather portfolio under my arm. Callahan walked beside me, flanked by 2 senior investigators from the State Financial Crimes Division. When we stepped into the crowded ballroom, the room went quiet. Julian spotted me first, an arrogant smirk spreading across his face as he raised his champagne flute. "Well, look who decided to show up," Julian announced loudly, drawing every guest's attention. "Did you drive that old rust bucket all the way here, Alexandra? Security, please escort my sister out. This event is strictly for legitimate heirs." 2 security guards stepped forward, but Callahan flashed an official injunction that made them freeze in their tracks. I walked straight onto the raised stage where Richard stood holding a microphone. "You can save your speeches, Richard," I said, my voice echoing through the silent hall. "You haven't inherited an empire. You've inherited the legal consequences of your own greed." Richard's face tightened. "What kind of nonsense is this, Alexandra? You were written out of the will." "No," I replied, placing the open audit reports on the podium before his guests. "You were. and the state financial investigators standing behind me are here to verify every single forged signature and fraudulent transfer you made." Callahan stepped up to the podium, opening his briefcase to present the authenticated, irrevocable final trust bearing grandfather's authentic signature and the state probate seal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Callahan announced, his voice commanding absolute silence across the ballroom. The preliminary document presented this morning was a legally invalid draft. Under the finalized Arthur Walton Revocable Trust, all real estate subsidiary entities and liquid accounts remain under the sole ownership of Walton Global Holdings, whose controlling voting shares transfer entirely to Alexandra Walton. Julian's face drained of all color, his champagne glass shattering onto the polished marble floor. "That's impossible. Dad gave us the real estate and the private aviation division." "He left you the physical liabilities," I said calmly, looking straight into his panicked eyes. "Before his passing, Grandfather consolidated every bad debt, shell account, and unpaid supplier balance your fraudulent schemes created over the past 5 years directly against those individual assets. You don't own multi-million-dollar properties. You hold over $40 million in unbacked corporate defaults." The senior investigator stepped forward, holding 2 sets of arrest warrants. "Richard and Julian Walton, you are being placed under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying corporate financial filings." Murmurs of shock rippled through the gathered elite as cameras flashed. Richard collapsed back into a dining chair, completely broken, while Julian began shouting excuses that fell on deaf ears. Their smug arrogance vanished in seconds, replaced by the crushing reality that Arthur Walton's final brilliant move had left them completely exposed and penniless. In the months that followed, the empire Arthur built underwent a complete transformation. Richard and Julian were convicted on multiple federal fraud charges, their personal assets seized to pay back the creditors they had defrauded for years. I restructured Walton Global Holdings from the ground up, establishing the Arthur Walton Foundation to provide transitional housing, job training, and mental health support for returning military veterans. It wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring the true legacy my grandfather spent his entire life building. Today, Grandfather's silver sedan sits permanently parked in the central courtyard of our headquarters, a lasting symbol that integrity, patience, and true strength will always outlast arrogance and greed. Every time I walk past it, I remember that the greatest gifts in life don't always come wrapped in luxury. Sometimes they come hidden in the humble things meant only for those who know how to listen. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your family tried to humiliate you with a used car at the will reading? Would you have investigated the GPS or walked away entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to mention the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the 2 videos on the screen right now for more thrilling family drama. Thank you for watching.